Let's talk about this supply chain thing. Now, as we speak, there's 250,000 containers of food stacked up at the docks due to delayed pickups from trucks, running out of space at the rail yards. And this has caused dozens of cargo ships to drop anchor outside the ports of California and New York. It's a problem. Matter of fact, the President Biden got involved. It's such a big problem, so he's made it one of his priorities. So you as a company, you as a business owner, have to be aware and manage supply chain. I've been talking about supply chain really since I've been a business developer. It didn't get a lot of traction because most people it just wasn't one of their priorities. I mean, small companies, we hate to say it, sometimes we can be a little short-sighted. We are following these shiny objects. We got to get our Facebook likes and our tweets and get our nice business cards and logos, but we're not looking down the road. And that's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's not your fault. It's not anybody's fault. It's just that sometimes you just got to go out and get this information. So what I'm going to talk about this supply chain management, which has probably been on very few people's radar until recently. They keep sending the news about these chips out here in the harbor. What's going on? How does that affect me? Well, it might not affect you directly today, but it is going to affect your stakeholders. And your stakeholders that are in the supply chain, eventually your number is going to be called as well. And we talk about customers, clients, vendors, partners, investors, and so forth, government agencies, community. And even though your stakeholders might not be directly impacted, but one or more of their stakeholders might be impacted. Let's give you an example. Let's say you're selling spices. And the company that sells you spices, let's say paprika, oregano, thyme, they're doing fine. It's like, hey, things are good. So you're saying like, well, I have nothing to worry about. They got plenty of inventory. Let me fill up my spices racks. But the farm that grows the spices is experiencing a drought. It's just a matter of time before your business feels the impact. That's a good example of supply chain economics and how to manage it. So my overarching advice to you today is to, as with most things, marketing, don't just wait for things to happen. Be part of the process. Engage. Be proactive. And supply chain management is no different than most things marketing that I talk about. Folks, we just can't sit around and let stuff happen to us. I hate to pick on small companies. And I do it out of love because I'm one myself. But we do sometimes let stuff just happen and complain about it after. Well, we could have done something to prevent it, or at least to minimize it. So an example of things that people are doing something about it, you have companies like Walmart, Amazon, Home Depot, these big product movers, they're adjusting their schedules and committing resources to mitigate this backlog at the ports. They're putting their drivers on like 24-hour shifts because one of the problems is that they're not picking this food up, these products from the ports fast enough. So they're committing to opening up additional warehouse space and sending out more trucks and having more workers to unclog these docks. Because, ladies and gentlemen, Christmas is coming. The holidays are coming. Whatever holiday you celebrate, December, November, January is a big time. It's a spending season. And you don't want to be caught flat-footed. So let me give you some tips on what you can do to help your company to navigate this crisis of supply chain economics. We're going to call it supply chain management today. First thing I want you to do is stay abreast of what's happening. Dig deep. Be curious. Ask some questions. So what's going on? What's up with these ships? What's on those ships? There's probably something on those ships that I need. Well, it could be, but you're not going to know if you have your head in the sand. So stay current on the news and plan. That's the other thing I want you to do. Always have a plan. If you have a business plan, sometimes you have to do a SWOT analysis. Sometimes a SWOT analysis will uncover some of these shortcomings, of which stands for uh, SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So a good SWOT analysis will sometimes reveal some of these problems before they happen. This may be a good time. Now, I used to be a buyer. I was a buyer for this company, Grand Union Supermarkets and Big Star stores and Colonial stores. And the thing that I learned during that period was to manage inventory. And they almost beat us with a whip to make sure inventory was low and your turn was high. In other words, you want to turn that inventory over as many times as possible. And the higher your turn, that was a good thing. And the lower your inventory, that got your points. Could get you a raise and a promotion. Well, I'm saying right now, I'm going to break the rules for a minute. You may want to go ahead and stock up on some inventory on your vital items. That's right. This is a good time to stock up on inventory. Now, if they're perishable items, don't go crazy with it. But things that have a long shelf life, go ahead and get you a few extra cases, a few extra bottles. Now, this may mean lower turn. That means your inventory, of course, is money. That money is sitting on the shelf. But this is not the time to be trying to have high turn and keep your inventory low. So if it's available now, go ahead and grab you something. I'm not saying hoard it, but you do want to make sure you do have adequate inventory. Another thing you can do, and if you're already doing it, it's a good time to revisit, is to shore up those relationships. We talk about on this show several times, we talk about barriers to entry and what the big companies have. One of the advantages the big companies have over the small companies, and oftentimes it's relationships. So these supplier agreements that you have, you need to go back and revisit those. And if you don't have them, you may have to make some supplier agreements to make sure that you're at the top of the list, because that's who's going to get the inventory and the products faster. And heaven forbid, if there's some type of exclusive agreement, you could actually be really wiped off the map because you cannot get the product. So go back and review any type of agreements, relationships you have with suppliers, and make sure they're sound. And when things get tight, you want to let them know, say, look, I'm one of your best customers. You got to look out for me. You better put some aside for my company. Also, you may want to increase lead time on the products that you offer. Let's say right now you're selling a book and the printer is having problems with paper, or they can't get the workers in on time. What you might want to do on your website is to say, look, you order today, we're going to get you that book in 2 weeks versus the 1 week or the 3 to 5 days that it normally takes. So you have the power to control that, and people will accept it. Don't put yourself in a situation where it looks like you're providing poor service when you could have taken a proactive approach and said, look, we don't have it right now. We're gonna get it to you in a couple of weeks or a month. So play with that lead time. You have the power to do that. Lead time. Let's see, what else can you do? You might look at alternate ingredients. If you're selling something now there's a short supply, or it's not readily available, you might look at what is there an alternative part, an alternative supplier, an alternative agreement, ingredient. Now, if it's something like a core ingredient on like if it's gluten-free or something like that, you don't have to play with that. But sometimes it doesn't matter what supplier you're using. And if it's something like a restaurant where it's not chiseled in stone and it's not going to materially affect the end product, you may want to look at some type of alternatives to some of those products that you're having experiencing supply chain issues with. Now, here's one of my favorite too. Many of you, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say probably most of you out here who are selling product, retail, inventory, you probably have too many SKUs or SKUs, what we call stock keeping units. If you're selling like 20, 30, 40 products as part of a line extension, look at cutting back on some of those items. Look at your top 10 If you're selling 50, look at your top 10. If you're selling 10, look at your top 3 or 4. And some of these other items, they're just making life difficult for you. There may be a specialty item that somebody just has to have. It's only one person ordering it. As much as you may like that person, you may have to let it go. This is business, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about survival. Look at your product selection. You're probably stocking some items right now that's really not worth it, particularly now that we're experiencing some supply issues. Now, let's say if you got some bank. Now, the next item is for people that have some money. Use that might and engage what we call vertical integration. And that's what we're seeing right now with companies like McDonald's, Amazon, Home Depot, the big companies. And vertical integration is an arrangement in which the supply chain of a company is owned by that company. That's right. If the truckers is part of the supply chain and you can't get the food delivered because of the truckers, what do? You go by the trucking company. That's exactly right. If you can't get that spice, if you can't get that ingredient that goes into your Happy Meal, you go by the farm. That's vertical integration. And you don't have to be Amazon or McDonald's to engage in that. You can do that on a smaller scale. That's right. Let's say if I'm a web designer and I can't get web design company, I can't get my website delivered on time. And there's a company out here that's supplying web designers. I might go out here and buy that during school so I can have me a steady supply of web designers. So, I mean, that's a pretty big example too, but I'm saying this can be done in smaller scales because vertical integration, it lowers your costs. It improves the quality because you control it. You have those critical resources available when you need them. You have improved coordination. It can increase your market share. Your distribution channels are secured. And you can capitalize on opportunities that are created by this vacuum. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to close by saying this. For every problem, you can take this to the bank. For every problem, there's opportunity. You can sit and moan and groan about the problem. But one of the flagship statements, one of the signatures of business ownership and business success is to find a problem and solve it. Find a need and fill it. So all you bright people out there that I've been talking to for the past 12 years, I want you to take this problem, this crisis, like you have all the others, and say, where can I jump in here and capitalize and make some money? And it's also, we have to condition ourselves to look beyond what's right in front of us. We can't just sit and let things happen. We have more power than we realize, but we have to use it.